Jacob. And of course, Jacob wrestles with God. Jacob submits to God. And the Abrahamic covenant is confirmed or reconfirmed. The introduction, Isaiah's blessings of Jacob showed Jacob was the heir to the covenantal promise God made to Abraham. However, because Jacob obtained the blessing through treachery, he was forced to flee his father's home and journey to live with his uncle Laban in Haran. During the first night as a fugitive, Jacob came to a deserted place and fell asleep. There God appeared to him in a dream and gave him a promise for the future. God promised to bless Jacob with land, with innumerable descendants, and to bless all the families of the earth through him and his descendants. The similarities between the promises given to Abraham and Jacob established Jacob as the rightful heir of the covenant God made with Abraham. Now, last week we went through the situation of Jacob stealing the birthright of Esau, or selling it to him for a bowl of beans, practically, some lentils. And then he stole his blessing by fixing himself up, or Rebekah fixed him up, that he could go and pretend to be Esau, and Esau and Jacob got the blessing that Esau was supposed to get because of his impersonation, because his father Isaac was blind, practically. But anyway, after that happened, Esau was so mad that he had said that when he says, my father's old, he's almost got his foot in his grave. And of course, he actually lived 43 more years after that. But anyway, Esau says, as quick as he dies, I'm going to kill Jacob. And that will righten things. And if he had killed Jacob, then he would have been an heir to everything, because Jacob had no children. But anyway, Rebekah said, she told, and she set it up, where that Isaac would send Jacob to Padan-aram, or to Laban's house, and take a wife from there, because Esau had already took 2 Canaanite women, and she had had 2 daughter-in-laws for 35 years that were Canaanites or Hittites. And she said, my life will mean nothing to me if Jacob marries one of these women. But of course then, on top of that, she was just trying to get him away, because Isaac probably didn't know that Esau was going to kill Jacob as quick as he died. But anyway, Jacob left. And he went on a journey. And that night, he got into a desolate place. And there was nothing there. It was remote. But anyway, Jacob went to sleep. And he saw a ladder going up into heaven. And he saw the angels of God ascending and descending upon that. And it went totally up into heaven. And at the top of the ladder, he saw God. And God told him, he said, I'm the God of Abraham and of Isaac. And he told him that he would give Jacob the land on which he was lying. And he said, not only to you, but to your seed. He said, your seed is going to multiply as thick as dust on the earth. He said, your seed will go to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south, and in you shall all of the people on the face of the earth be blessed.
Yes.
And that was quite a statement. But Jacob, he awakened out of his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place.
Yes.
He said, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and it is the gate of heaven. And it was just a remote place when Jacob went there.
Yes.
But then Jacob, he took the stone that he had slept on that night, and he set it up for a pillow, and he poured oil on it, and he made a vow.
Yes.
And he said that if God will go with me and bring me back safely again,
Yes.
he said, then surely everything I receive of him, I will give him the tenth thereof.
Right.
So Jacob, he went on to Haran, and he ran into the people outside of Haran at a well. There was 3 flocks that were there, 3 different flocks, and what they would do, they would gather together. Somebody would take the stone off of the well, and then they would water all the flocks. But he struck up a conversation with the men there, and he said, where are you from? He said, from Haran. And they said, do you know Laban? He said, yes, we know him. He said, is he well? He said, yes, he's well. And then they pointed out. He said, behold, Rachel, his daughter, cometh with the sheep. And Jacob looked up, and he saw Rachel. And it was love at first sight. She was a beautiful woman, according to the scriptures. And he went up to her, and he told her that he was Rebekah's, Laban's sister's child. And he kissed her, and he lifted up his head and wept. And Rachel, she was excited, so she ran back to Laban's house. And then Laban ran to meet Jacob. And then Jacob, he went to Laban's house. And he stayed with him a month. And, you know, he was happy. You know, I guess they was feeding him. But he said, well, you shouldn't work for me for naught. He said, tell me what your wages are going to be. What did he tell him?
I worked 7 years to get it.
Right. Jacob served him 7 years for Rachel. And he said that seemed to be but a few days for the love he had for her.
Amen.
And you know, he just no doubt spent time with the sheep and with Laban's house. And you know, Laban was happy with him, and Rachel was happy, and Jacob was happy. And then he finally came and he said, it's time for you to give me my wife. I have worked 7 years. And evidently, he was able to keep a calendar. And he probably had marked the days off to when he could marry Rachel. So then Laban gave him Rachel, his daughter, he thought. You know, he got all the men of the village together. They had a feast. They had the wedding. And then Jacob, what happened to him?
He got hoodwinked himself.
He got hoodwinked himself. And you know, they say that the Jews now, when they have a marriage ceremony, a Jewish ceremony, that the groom will always lift that veil and make sure that that's the right one. That's how far that goes down. But anyway, he just took it that was Rachel. And he went and spent all night in the tent with her. And you know, you can only imagine the conversation that they had or did not have. You know, she probably was scared to say anything because it would give away who she was. They was probably about the same size and everything, and it was hard for him to discern one to another. But then when he woke up the next morning, he looked and it was Leah. And how did Jacob feel about that? He didn't like it. I mean, he wasn't concerned about hurting Leah's feelings, He just went to Laban and demanded. He said, I worked for Rachel 7 years and you give me Leah. They said Leah was tender-eyed, but Jacob was beautiful and well-favored. And that's the one he worked for. But anyway, he gave her the wrong one, and because it was the custom of that country to never marry the younger daughter before the older daughter. And that sort of put the pressure on the older daughter, didn't it? Say, well, and the young one too. She couldn't get married till her older one got married. And then he said, if you would just give her week, then I'll give you Rachel also. So then that was the deal they worked out. So then the clock moves on. Now, Jacob had been there 7 years. Of course, there was no children then. So then Leah, she started bearing children. She bare Reuben, Simon, Levi, and Judah. And then she stopped bearing. And then Rachel was barren and she could not have any children. And she thought, and she knew about Abraham and Hagar and all that, I'm sure. But anyway, Rachel said, and they also Laban gave them a handmaid each when they got married. With Leah, he gave Zipporah. And then for Rachel, her handmaiden was Bilhah. So then she said, I will just give my handmaiden to Jacob, and then we'll have a child. They'll have a child together, and it will be counted as my child. And I'll take him up on my knees, and he'll be my son or daughter. So anyway, Rachel gave Bilhah to Jacob, and then she bare Dan and Naphtali. And then Leah, she thought, well, Rachel did that. I'll just give my handmaiden to Jacob. Because she wanted more kids, so Jacob would love her more. And then Zilpah, she had Gad and Asher. And then she went back to not marry. But then, or she was already not married. But then her son, Reuben, was out in the field, and he found some mandrakes. And he picked them, and he brought it to her. And he was just a little fellow. And Rachel said, she told Leah, give me of your son's mandrakes. She said, what? You've already stolen my husband, and now you want my son's mandrakes? And she said, well, let me have a night with Jacob. So then, and evidently, he was spending all his time with Rachel anyway from then on. But anyway, he went back to Leah that night, and she conceived, and then she bare the last two, which is Issachar, Zebulun, and then after that, Zebulun. And then later, Leah had died. And then after all that was done, then Rachel, God answered her prayer. She opened her womb, and she gave him a son, and that was Joseph. And that's as far as we get here. So anyway, in 7 years, they had a dozen kids. They didn't have the 12 sons yet because Benjamin wasn't born, but they had 11 sons and 1 daughter. And they were all under 7 years of old age. And that probably filled the house up pretty quick, didn't it? Okay, now, Jacob,
4
huh?
tenths, 4 tenths.
4 tenths, right, yeah. Filled it up quick. And you know, Rachel and Leah's children was actually first cousins. They were not only half brothers and sisters, or half brothers, but they were also first cousins. But I guess the handmaidens was just half, without being a cousin, I guess. But anyway, Laban, Jacob wanted to leave then. He said, I'm going to take my wives and I'm getting out of here. And he said, well, Laban talked him into staying. He said, I knew that before you got here, I didn't have very much. But now, God has prospered me in all things. Yeah. And so then he gave him, he said, what will be your wages? And he said, I'm not going to ask of you anything. He said, but, and I want to take out the ring straight and the spotted, and he took out the he goats that were ring straight and spotted, all the she goats that were speckled and spotted, and some white in them, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hands of his sons. And that's what he took. And then Laban, you know, of course, he was good with that, because he knew that most of his sheep were white, and there was just a few of these oddball colors, and if that's all Jacob wanted, then, you know, he was glad to do that.
Brother James,
Yes.
Jacob had this dream about what the cattle was gender, about being ring straight, whatever. He probably had that dream before he asked for his wages to be so God.
Probably did. He was sneaky, wasn't he? But anyway, but it didn't seem like it would make any difference, you know, in Laban's mind. So, and then they put 3 days between them, and they separated the Jacob's sheep, and then Jacob kept Laban's sheep. And then Jacob outwits him. Jacob and Laban had another agreement that Jacob would get all the spotted goats and sheep with the flocks and work for a few more years. Both tried to rig the bargain to come out with more livestock, but Jacob, of course, he got the upper hand. But Jacob did something weird. He took rods of poplar, of hazel, and chestnut tree, and he drove them up before the guttering, you know, where the sheep would come to drink water. And then he would lay them also in the troughs. And the sheep, when they came in for water, then the rams would leap on them and they would conceive. Now, people for years have tried to figure out what happened. They said, you know, was there something in the rods? Was there something that made the sheep like that? You know, it does say he stripped them so they were white. I don't know if that would starstruck a sheep where they would stay there long and just look at that. I don't know. But anyway, and some people say, well, maybe it was the sap that was in those that did that. But what's y'all's opinion of what happened? I mean, that's kind of a crazy thing to drive up rods and then throw them in the gutter troughs.
I think Jacob was simply trying to figure out a way to make God's promise happen.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he thought that he helped a little bit, but he didn't, because it doesn't make any difference what a woman looks at. What a child looks like. But the fact is that those genetics were in the sheep already. And God just worked it out for Jacob's benefit, because God's blessing on Jacob, even though Jacob did not deserve it. He did not deserve that ring God gave him. He
And it also said Jacob, you know, when they had the ring-streaked lambs, that he would turn them towards sheep. You know, was he trying to influence them? He said, well, maybe if they look at them, they'll look like them. You know, but anyway, yeah, Richard had it right on the head there. It came to pass at that time the cattle conceived, that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams leaped upon the cattle, were ring-streaked, speckled, and gristled. And the angel of God spake unto me in the dream, saying, Jacob. And he said, Here am I. And he lifted up the eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle, are ring-streaked, speckled, and gristled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. And you know, when Jacob, you know, when he was leaving, you know, he worked 6 years for this. And Rebekah and Leah, not Rebekah, but Rachel and Leah, he had talked to them about leaving and going back to his home, you know, in Canaan with Isaac. And they said, well, you know, our father has took our money from us. Evidently, they was talking about the bride price that the bride get when they get married, that Laban had just took that money and he had spent it. He took their money, and Laban's sons was not looking at Jacob the way he did before. You know, Jacob said he's changed my wages 10 times. He says if Laban said it was gristled, then that he would give Jacob all the gristled sheep, then all of them that was born was gristled. Or if it was speckled, whatever Laban said, okay, we're going to have to renegotiate this contract. You need to get the spotted sheep. And then it turns around, all the sheep that were born was spotted. And you know, he just couldn't win. He said he changed it 10 times. So the angel was just there. And whenever Laban put down a new contract, the angel understood it as that we'll just make them all spotted, since it's Laban said that's what Jacob would get. But anyway, it was all just in obedience, really. It was in obedience to the dream that God's will was going to be done, and Jacob, all he did was obey. It's just like the rod in Moses. When he stretched it out on the Red Sea, the rod did not have any magical power to make the water to part. It was God who did it, and he just told him to raise his rod. And Jordan did not have magic water in it that made Naaman lose his leprosy. It was just obedience to God, because he says he gives the Spirit to who? Those that obey him. And it was just a big obedience there. But anyway, Laban, he went to shear the sheep. And he came back, and he got word that Jacob had took all his household and he had left. And it took him 7 days to catch up to him. But then he just rebuked Jacob terribly. And he said, you've run away with all my children and my daughters and my sheep. And, you know, and then they got to Mount Gilead. And an angel appeared unto Laban in a dream and told him, he said, take heed how you handle Jacob. Do not do him any evil. And, you know, Laban told Jacob the next day that he had did that. But anyway, they settled up their score, and they piled stones up, and they had a feast, and they said that we will not go past this altar to one another for harm. So they made the covenant, and then Jacob went on. He traveled from Haran down. He went back to Penuel, and that's right on the right side there, you see. And he had sent messengers before to Esau, telling him that he was coming back. And, you know, Jacob thought, he said, Esau, you know, we'll just divide it up in two companies, my family. And says if we divide it up, and then Esau kills one side, maybe the rest can escape. You know, so he was accepting the absolute worst, because they had come back and said, Esau cometh with 400 million. That's all he did. For all those years, for those 20 years, he knew that he had done Esau wrong, he was guilty about it, and it was time to face the music. And Esau had it in his heart to kill him, and now he had 400 men, and it was just a terrible thing that he was going to go for. But he evidently, it says that he multiplied greatly in servants, men servants, women servants, cattle, really prospered beyond all expectations. But anyway, he got up 3 droves of this. He made 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts. That's just camels giving milk, it's got colts. 40 kine, which would be cows, 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. And he would take his servants and he would send one of these droves out. And when they came to Esau, they would tell him that your servant Jacob has sent you a present. And it's all these. But anyway, they would put a space between the droves. And then after Esau sort of got over the one drove, here come another drove. And then another drove. So Esau was sort of softened up. Or Jacob hoping he would be anyway, but with all these presents that he's given. But it's amazing how big Jacob got in such a short time. Okay, and he got to the river, or the brook Jabbok. And this was the night before he was going to meet Esau. So he sent his wives across. And who did he send first? Handmaidens, right. He sent the handmaidens, then he sent Leah, and then he sent Rachel. You know, he always played favorites, didn't he? Supposedly, anyway. But anyway, they went across, and then Jacob, he wrestled all night until the breaking of day with a man or angel or God himself. And he would not let him go. And when he saw that he prevailed not against them, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And you think about that. If you was wrestling somebody and they throwed your joint out of, your thigh out of joint, what would you do? You'd say, I give up. I can't move, right? But Jacob kept going. He held on to that angel and he would not let go. Amen. And all that while his thigh was out of joint. And he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. And I said, I will not go, let me go, except thou bless me. Amen. But the angel did bless him. But they had a little conversation here. He said, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, thou shalt no more be called Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God. Yeah. When we look back and when we say Jacob and we compare it with Israel, what are we really comparing? Who is Jacob when you say Jacob? Yeah. Supplanter, right. Deceiver. He's the crook. What do you hear when you have Israel? Prince. And you know, that's the way it is with us. We get a new name written in heaven, you know. He said he has a name that only the Lord knows. So, you know, when Paul was converted, or Saul was converted, he changed his name to Paul. But anyway, Jacob is the fleshly man. He done all the fleshly stuff. Israel was the spiritual man. He had not been touched by God. And of course, you know, the nation of Israel, we don't call it the nation of Jacob. And Jacob asked him, and he said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, wherefore is it that thou ask my name? And he blessed him there. And I believe that Jacob, probably when the angel blessed him, that he put his thigh back in socket. It said it was halting as he was going on his thigh. But, you know, he probably had a stick because he was a shepherd to walk with. But he would not have been able to walk if his hip had been out of place, right? But the angel, I believe, put it back in, but it was still sore. And it hurt because he bowed 7 times when Esau came. He bowed 7 times before he got to Esau. And how would a man be able to bow down and get back up and walk and bow down again 7 times if his thigh was still out of place? I believe the angel, when he blessed him, he just put it back together. So Jacob, he was probably surprised. He came and he met Esau, and Esau ran and he embraced him. And you know, they let all their bygones be bygones, and then they hugged and make up, and they whip on his neck. And you know, it said that he brought his family by, and then they came up one by one, and they would bow down before Esau. And Esau offered him, he said, just go with me. And Jacob said, no, I can't go with you. You know, we have all these young sheep and stuff, and if we overdrive, we will lose them, you know. But he said, you just go ahead. And he even offered him to take his sheep and all of his back. But, you know, that shows you the situation that we all get into sometime in our life. And if you ain't been there yet, you will be, I'm sure. But there comes a time when you run up against an obstacle. You have no clue what to do. You have nobody that can really help you. Your enemies won't help you. Your friends maybe can't help you. But it's something that you have to work out with God. And you have to go alone, you know, and wrestle with God to get your answer. You get your eyes off of everything else, off of circumstances, off of people, everything. And you go straight to God and to Him alone, and God will answer those who seek after Him. But it takes that desperation sometimes. Where can you go to get her done? And then when God gives you the assurance, I think that's really the gift of faith working in your lives, you know. When you pray and you get that dead assurance that God has answered your prayer and you don't have an ounce of doubt, I believe that's when God drops the gift of faith in your heart, in your life, and you just would not disbelieve. You know God answered, and that it's always backed up with the results. And I guess we're going, right? Yes.
In the Old Testament,
Yes.
it alternates between Jacob and his part of the scripture. When God called them, because they're acting like it.
Right.
When He calls them Israel, they're acting. He's called them.
Praise the Lord. Amen. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about Jacob, but you know, like we said last week, he said, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated in Romans. When neither one of them had done either right or wrong. And Paul said, well, how can he say that he loved Jacob when he's not done any right or wrong? Or Esau? Or hates Esau? And he said, God will have mercy on whom he will have mercy on whom he will he will. But anyway, Jacob and Esau got together, and when Isaac did die, they both were there, and they buried their father together. Praise the Lord. God bless you.